Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another informational session. Of course, I have my co host with me, Lisa Wilson. As you all know, each month we have an informational session, and Lisa is the coordinator of that. So, with this being said, I just want us to sit tight. We're going to go over parents' roles, rights, and responsibilities. So with that being said, I'm gonna turn this over to Lisa, and we do have some slides. So Lisa is gonna navigate and take us through the slides.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me again, Paula. It is my honor to be here and to talk about something that's very dear to my heart. And it's actually kind of foundational to advocacy because we strive to empower parents so that they can become the best advocate that they can for their children. And so in doing that, we want parents to understand the roles and their responsibilities under IDEA. And then most importantly, we want them to understand their federal rights. We talk about that all the time. And just to recap from our last discussion before we get going, again, parents, we want to encourage you, if you have not had your ESY decision, it's very important that you ensure that you address that. And I know that some certain districts are on spring break, some have just returned, but it's very important to go ahead and make sure that those decisions are kind of solidified within the IEP. And then I did make a suggestion to superintendents at the end of our last session, just about thinking outside of the box, thinking about pilot programs, not necessarily the one that I mentioned, but we could just get our leadership to start to think outside the box and think about pilot programs, about how we can make the IEP process functional for everyone. And we want to put a hyper focus on our teachers, our educators. We want to look at a way of how we can unpack some of the responsibility to give them an opportunity to just focus on their classrooms and then put together other teams to help deal with the IEP process. So I just wanted to, recap that. And I'm hoping that we can continue to develop that conversation more. But as we always talk about our three, pieces of legislation, IDEA, the Title II of the ADA, and Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. Primarily, we're going to focus on IDEA tonight. I just always like to bring in Title II and Section 504 because I want parents to understand from the very beginning, Paula, that do not get pigeonholed under IDEA because you have expansive rights when you look at each of these laws individually and then collectively. Your children are really, really protected. So first of all, IDEA requires the states and the school districts to identify, evaluate, and serve children with disabilities as a condition of receiving federal special education funding. Parents are central to this process. And the key thing there is that the school districts are obligated because they do receive federal funding for special education. So on our agenda, as I already introduced my three favorite pieces of legislation, we're going to talk about parent participation in the special education process. This is so important. Parents, please understand that these are not just words on paper. This is real. The United States Supreme Court has codified into law that parents are legal members of the IEP team and that your voice matters. And in fact, they actually refer to parents as subject matter experts, as the person best situated to help make informed decisions. And so advocacy and ensuring access to services and supporting children's rights and inclusion. So I think you went ahead of me, Paula. I'm on number 3, purpose and key provisions of IDEA. There we go. It's right after the agenda. There we are. Purpose and key provisions of IDEA. So Ensuring students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education tailored to individual needs. And if you're like Paula and myself, we both federal employees, so we know that there are so many acronyms that your brain is forced to retain, but we like for everybody to understand what FAPE is, and that's FAPE, FAPE. It stands for free and appropriate public education. So it should be tailored to your child's individual needs. And in my opinion, Paula, the most important word in that sentence is individual. It's not a one size fits all. And that's where the IEP team really becomes the most instrumental part of this process, because it's generally made up of the people that work closely with the child to understand what the individual strengths and weaknesses are and the nuances. So it's very important that we understand that FAPE should be individually tailored to your child's individual needs. And so when we look at early intervention, evaluation, and IEPs, the law requires timely identification and supports with services documented through an individualized education plan program. And I'm sorry, there we go again with another acronym, IEP, individualized education program. Sometimes you'll see plan. So a lot of times I say individual education plan. So sometimes it's just the semantics and the language. But the most important part there is that everything should be documented. And I know that sometimes we develop very close and comfortable relationships with our IEP team, and we can have side conversations, but it's about things that are really important that should be documented. Paula, for example, so my son, Paula knows there's been an ongoing saga with my son's transportation. Well, one of the things I realized when I was dealing with some administrative documentation recently, Paula, is that there's not a mention of an aid for my son's bus on the bus. And so one of the questions to me was, well, is it in the IEP? And I'm thinking, well, no, I did request a meeting with transportation. Transportation really weren't able to participate in the meeting in a meaningful way like I would have thought. But it really was incumbent upon the IEP team not only to give my child transportation, but to also ensure that he had an aid. So documentation is very important because you have to be specific, Paula. Everything thinking in our minds, it needs to be down on the paper.
And I agree, even with, I'm glad you're saying this, because something as simple as my daughter having a harness, that is something that was supposed to be in her IEP. And I think initially when she got on the bus, I didn't realize that they were supposed to give her a harness. It was written in her IEP, but they weren't doing it. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate because it can become cumbersome, because some of these things you want to think that we really shouldn't have to have into writing. My son is on a bus 2 hours a day, and it's just him and a bus driver. And as I put in my administrative documentation, my son is traveling over two of the most dangerous highways in the state of Maryland. That's Indian Head Highway 210 and then 95, that corridor that he travels. And so it's not that I'm projecting and that I'm a fatalist in my thinking, like, oh, something's going to happen to my child. But what if something happens? The bus driver becomes incapacitated. That's why it's important for that aid to be there, because who's going to tend to my child who's likely going to be in a state of panic and just unable to work through an emergency? But I just never thought that I had to write in there that an aide should be on the bus. But the question was posed to me, is it in the IEP? So documentation. So, I'm not going to keep going on that, but just understanding why everything we think, Paula, even though it could be something basic, we have to make sure that it's in writing. Because, the old thing, if it's not in writing, then it didn't happen or it doesn't count. And it's so sad that we have to, that we're in this environment. But I just want to encourage parents, whatever you're thinking, like, my son and another family I work with, they take a medication called guanfacine. But one of the things with guanfacine, Paula, is that children really have to increase their water intake with that particular medication. So I was able to have a family get that into the IEP, hydration breaks. Child. I'm also working for that with my son as well. He has to get that water. His mouth will be dry. His lips will be dry and cracking. I can tell when he's not drinking enough water. But hydration breaks, and you would think that's not something that needs to be in there, but it really is something that needs to be in there. So documentation.
Yes, important.
So when we talk about parent partnership, the core principle, schools must collaborate with families in decisions. And I consistently remind everyone that there are over 7 million disabled children in the United States of America. And schools must collaborate with families. It's not an option. We have to work together. All right, we can go on to the next slide.
Okay.
So when we look at understanding Title II of the ADA, this is important. We're talking about scope. It covers all public entities, including schools, transportation, and government services, ensuring non-discrimination for individuals with disabilities. And with this, I try to tell people, when you think about Title II, or you think about, let's just look at ADA, the American with Disabilities Act. And I'm sorry, parents, there's another acronym. We're acronym heavy in special education.
Yes. Don't be afraid to ask, what does that mean, if that comes across to you? Yeah.
Yes, but when I think about the American with Disabilities Act, every time I pull up to a business or a restaurant and I see that handicap parking, that is my reminder of the American with Disabilities Act. And I see that depression in the sidewalk, like a wheelchair ramp, accessibility. So when you think about the American with Disabilities Act, think about accessibility, because that's what it is. It is creating access to programs and services for disabled people, to ensure that there is no discrimination. So when you look at the protections, it guarantees equal opportunity and prohibits exclusion from participation in or denial of benefits of public programs and activities. And again, personal example, my son, his transportation was stopped by the school district for a reason that's based on an internal policy, but that's a moot issue. But when you take a child out of, when you stop their services, you're effectively and constructively excluding them from that program or service. And remember, when they receive special federal funding for special education, they have a duty and an obligation to live up to the letter of the law. So think about exclusion. Another thing I like to bring this to parents' attention, especially if you have a child who's been having behavioral issues and they've been disciplined by the school district. Sometimes they'll sit children in another classroom, or they'll put them in some type of in-school suspension. Well, you have to really look at those, the disciplinary measures very clearly and closely, and understand if your child is being excluded from their general education, or whatever program that they're in. Exclusion. The one thing the Department of Justice, they haven't done a lot in the area of education. Of course, they did back Brown versus Board of Education, but one of the recent cases I can tell you about that I have found, Paula, is exclusion. The Department of Justice have really taken a very proactive stance on excluding not only disabled citizens, but with a focus on disabled students. So if you have those behavior issues and your child is being suspended, and we'll talk about this in another presentation, understanding what a manifestation hearing is. If your child is going to be suspended for more than 10 days, they're obligated to do a manifestation hearing. And I want to do a little bit more research, because I'm not so sure that it has to be 10 consecutive days, because what will happen is schools will just start suspending them for 1 and 2 days, 1 and 2 days, 1 and 2 days, 1 and 2 days. And so you have to watch that. But that exclusion piece is heavy. And the Department of Justice has taken a very, very proactive stance on that. And then you go to accommodations, requires reasonable modifications and auxiliary aids to provide accessibility. There's our word again, including for non-academic and extracurricular activities. So a lot of times, say a child may have a 504 plan or IEP plan. And again, the schools try to keep it married and tethered to the academic situation, but clearly the law tells us this includes non-academic and extracurricular activities. So let me give you an example of that. With children with special that receive special education and transportation as a related service, Paula, they should be entitled to participate in extracurricular activities and still receive the benefit of that transportation as their non-disabled peers. So it's just so much that we kind of take for granted, but when we really slice and dice it down, we really have to understand what's individual to your child, what is going to help your child to access their curriculum, their education, what's going to help them access it, and then what are the supporting auxiliary aids and supporting things that they may need while they're accessing. It's just so important. 20% of students with disabilities receive services under Section 504, only highlighting its broad protections and the importance of strong 504 plans. Now here, Paula, this is just going to be Lisa Wilson's opinion. This does not represent the opinions of advocacy. I'm going to give you my disclaimer. 20%, and you think about that 7 million children, 20% is a relatively low number. So what I will tell you is that it's been my experience, because I requested a 504 plan alongside parallel to my son's IEP plan. And the school district said, oh, no, we don't have to do that. We'll just roll his accommodation over into the IEP. Let me tell you why I have a problem with that. And it's not that they're doing anything illegal, but sometimes you have to look at motives. Once your child has a 504 plan, Paula, if that plan is violated in any type of way, the office with the oversight authority is in the Department of Education. Once there are violations in the IEP, we have to go to the state. So it would be MSDE, the Maryland State Department of Education. But if there's a violation, there's an external oversight body. So what I have concluded is that schools like to avoid 504 plans. If they, and this is Lisa Wilson's opinion, if they fail to follow through with their legal obligation, there is an external oversight body. And outside of the state, it goes directly to the federal government. And so I'm very suspicious as to why the 504 tool is not used more, because there's a possibility, and this could be very helpful to teachers, there's a possibility that some children that need minor accommodations probably should have a 504 plan and not an IEP. I'm just very suspicious about that. And, you know, we can definitely get into that a little bit later and look at the numbers. But I do find it very interesting that we only have 20%, because as you can see, it says broad protections. So the children more protection.
Okay.
So the next slide, parent participation in the special education process. I believe that parents are the important people at the IEP table, in agreement with the United States Supreme Court, who recognize parents as subject matter experts. So it's so important that you just not only just showing up is not enough, Paula. You have to participate in a meaningful way to ensure that you're supporting your child,
Mm-hmm.
speaking to their strengths and their weaknesses. And we definitely encourage parents to write out parent statements and read them into the record, then have them subsequently adopted into the PWN. And I'm sorry, there's another acronym, parents. PWN, and is the prior written notice, something that must be issued anytime there's a change to the IEP. And even if the school refuses to make a change to the IEP, they have to justify that PWN as to why. So, talking about evaluation and eligibility involvement, referrals. Parents can initiate or consent to a referral for an evaluation under IDEA. So this is very important. My son has a low vision condition. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make this about me, but
No, but I love your real life examples.
thank you. I just like to make it more practical because sometimes, Paula, and we talk about this, like we can talk so high, we can go over the heads of our audience. And I like to just bring it down into real time and real layman terms. So my son has a low vision condition. He's visually impaired. And so I requested for the IEP team and the language that I use, if they would consider him for a vision assessment. And so you can, as a parent, you have that authority. If you see something and you believe your child needs to be either assessed for detection of, say, maybe another disability, say you suspect your child has dyslexia, you can go to that IEP team and say, I think my child should be assessed or tested for, whatever. I'm just using dyslexia. And then as far as consenting, so when the roles are reversed and the schools bring a request to the parent has to consent. So they cannot do any of the psychological testing. They can't do any of that. Even, the behavior, the BIPs, the functional behavior assessments, they can't do any of that without your consent. And parents, that should let you know how important this process is. And so notice of assessments. Parents receive formal notification about planned assessments. And I like to use, for this particular example, your annual IEP meeting. Sometimes there may be an opportunity for a new assessment if there's a suspicion of a disability in a certain area. But then we have what you call the triennial. That's every 3 years. That's when you're going to see that big battery of testing being done for your children. And at that time, the IEP team should give you plenty of notice. So then you'll have an opportunity to understand what tests will be conducted, how they will be conducted. For example, my son, and I can't think of this test, it's escaping me right now, but they have now the fifth version of it. It is now automated. And that is important because that will allow children like my son who has dysgraphia, all these other fine motor disabilities, they will no longer have to write or circle dots and different things on this standard test. They would be able to take the test in the computer. And this is a very important test, and the name is escaping me at this moment, but it's issued by the school psychologist. So the reason I bring that up is because, again, getting that notice that it's time for us to start the testing, you can ask those questions. How will my child be assessed? What accommodations will be afforded to him or her? So it's just very important. I consider the IEP process to be an ongoing process. it's just an ongoing group of conversations. It's an ongoing dialogue. It's information going bi-directional. You're giving information to the school, they're giving information to you, and it's just a constant process, and it's all to support the child. The eligibility meeting, parents participate in meetings to determine qualifications. So again, you should be at every meeting. Think of a scenario, Paula, where a parent would not be at an IEP meeting, short of a parent just not being available or refusing to come. But you should always be there,
and as you say, don't go alone.
Oh, that's our number one rule. That one rule in advocacy, you never ever go to an IEP meeting alone. And you certainly want to make sure you're at each and every one of them. And it's also important that you understand, I do want to hit this, Paula, that after they do those assessments and then the IEP meeting is scheduled, there are certain time limits that they have to provide you the results of those tests so that you can consume that information and you can pick up the phone and call a buddy or call another advocate and say, hey, I want to run this by you. How should I, what should I speak to? So this is just so important. And the Code of Federal Regulations, I was just going to say, it outlines who should be in an IEP meeting. And it's very important that you understand that, because any person that's working with your child should be in your IEP meeting. Now, I did suggest that, if someone wants to take me up on my pilot project, that we create, tiger teams with data analysts and caseworkers and social workers, different people, so we can just try to reimagine what this IEP process looks like. But the Code of Federal Regulations outlines who should be in the meetings. And then program planning, the parents collaborate to develop the individualized program. We gave you some examples. If your child is on a medication, they need water, then you want to make sure that it's in there. You want to say, my child needs hydration breaks. And also, parents, there is a section in the IEP where you can talk about the child's strengths and weaknesses. That is your opportunity. That is your opportunity to really create information in that document that speaks to your child like no one else has the ability to do so. Okay, the role in IEP development, the benefits, enhance students' achievement and satisfaction when parents participate in IEP development. This is important, Paula, because so many times schools and teams like you to only believe that it's what's happening in the school building. And that's not true, Paula. The home events are very equally as important as what's happening in the school. And so you should be able to, as the parent, to say, exactly, actually, Paula had a great example a couple months ago. They said Morgan can do A, B, C, D, E, but at home, Morgan couldn't do A, B, C, D, E. It's so important that you give the home perspective and it documented in the report, in the IEP, and certainly in the PWN. That particular, like the progress notes reflect that the child is meeting the goals and objectives, but that's not being reflected at home. It's very important. Your role as the parent, you want to collaborate with educators to set goals, determine services, and monitor progress. The thing I want to say there is monitor progress. And you say, how can I monitor progress? Easy. Number one, every parent, every quarter should be scheduling an observation at your child's school. Now, every school handles the observation situation differently. We do understand that the privacy rights of other students are definitely considered and factored into these decisions, but parents, should have equal opportunity to go into a classroom and observe their child, because how can you fulfill your role as we're talking about now? How can you fulfill your role as a legal member of the IEP team if you don't have an opportunity to observe your child? And sometimes schools get a little weird. They think we're spying on them, and it's not about spying, but I do present with a notebook and an ink pen, and I am taking notes.
But another thing, Lisa, for me is I think if we're working as a team and we're all on the same team, just to make sure that that child gets exactly what they need, to me that is vital because I mean, even with neurotypical kids, kids do things at school that they don't do at home. Kids do things at school that they don't do at, I mean, vice versa, that
Mhm.
they do stuff at home that, so I think, when I know even with my son who's neurotypical, when I went to his school, a lot of times when I like to observe him, there were things I would be like, well, he doesn't do this at home.
Mhm.
So I worked together with the teacher. And again, we made a team. It was a team approach. And so
Mhm.
for me, I think that is so important just to make sure that, like you said, a lot of the teachers may act strange as if you're spying on them. But no, I think it's coming together as a team to make sure that that individual gets whatever they need. And
Mhm.
again, their kids do differently or with their parents that they may do at school and vice versa.
Exactly. And Paula, not only are we talking about, let's just look at homework. Let's see how much support do they need.
Hmm.
For me, I went back and asked the team to if they could modify his homework assignments.
Hmm.
He's exhausted from being at work at school all day with his multiple disabilities and his vision condition. So can we modify this? And I was successful in doing that. So if it was a problem, a page full of 6 problems, they would black out 3 of them, and then
Mm.
Blake would only be responsible for 3. And so these are the things, but they don't know your child is exhausted when they come home, and that they fall out and just kind of flop around, their energy is low. They won't know that until you share that information. You say, hey, my child is really he's carrying a heavy load. And
Yeah.
can we look at how we address his homework assignments? So that's
Mm.
why it's so important for you to, be there to interject that information. And again, I know that schools like for you to keep it between the bells, the morning bell and the afternoon bell, but the IEP process is 24 hours a day, and that information is vital to the process. Um, Challenges, communication barriers and scheduling conflicts can hinder parent environment, hinder parent involvement. And so I'm a stickler on this. And let me say that again in case my words got a little confused there. Communication barriers and scheduling conflicts can hinder parental involvement. This is really important. I believe everything should be done by email. I believe that that's the only way we can
A
actually
paper trail.
hold each other accountable.
That's right.
And then let's be reasonable. We no one expects an automatic response. As a parent, it may take 48 hours. In fact, some
Hmm.
people put that in their email signature. Your email has been received. Please allow us 48 hours to respond. I think that's kind of what all teachers in schools should be mandated to put in their email signatures, Paula.
Hmm.
Because if I don't hear from you, I'm thinking you're ignoring me, But
Exactly.
in a professional response is to let people know we have your email and it may take us 48 hours to respond. And then scheduling conflicts. This is why it's so important. We know, Paula, what happens once a year? The annual IEP meeting. It should
Hmm.
be a surprise to anybody. So
Hmm.
annual IEP meeting is going to be in June. By April, we should be in contact with each other. How is everyone's schedule looking for June?
Hmm.
Let's kind of start looking at what days we can consider so people can block it off on their calendars.
Hmm.
It's about that communication. But when you don't have communication, that's a problem. And then I actually, at my son's last school, I received an email telling me the IEP meeting is going to be on this day, January 15th at 10:15. Well, it won't be. And let me explain to you why. Because the way this goes is that you offer me days and then I accept the day that's available, and I mean, she apologized and it was okay. But there's an old saying, Paula, you have to teach people how to treat you. So that's one of the things that I'm a stickler on. Now, you can't just tell me when the IEP meeting is going to be, because I have a full-time job. And I have an employer that I have to consult with and put in leave to attend this meeting. So you can't just tell me when the meeting is going to be. And I think that's what this is saying, communication barriers. It's those little things, Paula, that if we could just get over those little bitty things, we can just use our energy to, to make sure that we can come up with legally sufficient IEPs to really help move these children forward. I jumped ahead. Okay, but I think that was it. Okay, outcomes. More individualized and effective education plans align with student needs and family preferences. Okay. So again, it's so important. And I just want to go back to that communication, a right to challenge decisions. Parents, you have a right to dispute eligibility, placement, services, or the overall adequacy of the IEP. Now, we're not going to talk about this, but Paula, we're going to have, before this year is out, we're going to have an entire segment over how to file a complaint, how to raise an issue.
I like that.
How to get to resolution. If you can't get to resolution at the school level, then we have to move it to the administrative level, move it to the state. Then you also have an opportunity to have a due process hearing. So there are a lot of different things you can do as a parent when you may not be in agreement or you need to challenge something that's happening. And there's an appropriate way to do it. And we know we want to keep our cool. We want to be professional, but you need to understand that you have a right to dispute or challenge anything that's happening in that IEP process. And we're going to dedicate, because I am a subject matter expert. I file so many complaints. But I think that parents need to know that, and not that we're promoting complaints, because we want this to be a very open and, positive experience. But when there is a conflict of interest or a conflict between the parent and the IEP team, the parent deserves to understand that the buck doesn't stop there. Exactly. My mother told me something early in my life, Paula. She said, everybody has a supervisor.
I love it.
Everybody. And so if you feel that something isn't going right, there is a way. There is a structured path forward for you to challenge and dispute. Okay. So collaboration for 504 plans. And so, this is the thing that and I'm hopefully I'm going to make some changes, but I definitely would like, because I do believe, like for my son, I believe some of his things that are embedded in his IEP really should be in 504 plan.
Yeah, because it is accommodations. It definitely is accommodations.
There you go. And so, and to me, I think that it's intended to be separated out, because if it wasn't, then why would we have Section 504? So Section 504 is the civil rights law that protects students with disabilities from discrimination in any federally funded school. It applies more broadly than IDEA and covers students who may not need special education, but do need accommodations. So when we look at this, parents and school staff should work together to define the supports that ensure equal access to education. So for me, I immediately think about my son's 17-inch laptop that he's supposed to have and touchscreen, because equal access. He can't keep up with the other children with handwriting. He can't keep up, so he doesn't have equal access because of his disabilities. So the laptop allows him to have equal access where he's able to keep up, move along, and he's not trying to wrestle with the pencil, to access his education. The computer device is the accommodation that allows for equal access. Now, this is less formal than an idea and an IEP, but all the input still matters. Section 504 planning often includes fewer formal meetings. So teachers if you're listening, so teachers, you can use your position on the IEP team and say, you know what, I'm not so sure that this should be in the IEP arena. Maybe it should be a 504. And what happens, you have fewer meetings. That should be a win for everyone. But the parent perspective remains essential. And we've already given examples on 504. If you have a child that's a football player and he's in a full cast and he needs temporary handicap parking, and he needs to access the building from a certain way because of the crutches, whatever. That's definitely what we're talking about. That's why it says you don't have to necessarily need special education to get an accommodation. Accommodations are kind of open for everyone, disabled children and non-disabled children. But when we talk about it, we're talking about it in the context of our disabled children. Strong collaboration improves outcomes. Research links effective parent-school teamwork to stronger implementation fidelity and student success. Only if we could really make this, if this could really become our everyday reality. What happens, it gets into that push and pull, and that tension is created, and sometimes it's very difficult to overcome. I've been very fortunate. I have requested for our parent support center to attend mostly all of my meetings, because sometimes I just feel like, and they're neutral, they're not advocates, they're neutral. They're in federally funded positions, but they're employees of the school district. But sometimes you just need to look around in a meeting, Paula, and believe somebody is there to support you. Because when you don't feel that and have that, it can really be an unpleasant and uneasy situation. So I like the fact that research proves that stronger implementation with fidelity and student success are the outcomes. But taking it back to leadership, Paula, this is a leadership issue. If the research speaks to this, then it should be mandatory that there is an ongoing process to strengthen parental relationships and parental collaboration. It should be a commitment from the top all the way down.
I agree.
Because this is for the student. It's not about the parents. It's for the student. So advocacy and access. Then we look at the next slide, 92%. Ensuring access to FAPE. Remember, parents, FAPE stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. 92% FAPE compliance rate in U.S. public schools, reflecting effective advocacy and idea service delivery. I will tell you, audience, that I do live in Maryland and I do live in Prince George's County. And Prince George's County, it generally has the highest rate of administrative complaints in the state of Maryland. That is concerning. And what I will tell you is that in Maryland, stepping outside of PG County, I just received a docket number for one of my recent complaints, and I am number 408. That is alarming to me, Paula, because July 1, the fiscal year begins. 408 families have filed complaints across the state of Maryland
Wow.
because of distressing and troubling situations with their IEPs. So when I see this 92%, and I'm gonna tell you about me, Paula. Statistics like this, I don't really buy into it a lot because guess what? Something can start out as a complaint and then it can get resolved. It could get resolved through mediation. It could get resolved through just a meeting of the minds. There's settlements that happen. There a lot of ways that complaints can go away. So I'm not an absolutist when it comes to statistics of this nature, because this is kind of saying that there's favorable compliance. But I think all of us know, we all have our own individual stories, that the schools are not in compliance like they should be. I'll just leave it at that. But I'm not absolutist, because I know that a lot of things can happen before a complaint gets to the final phase. So addressing accommodations and modifications, parents, this is so important. We need you to be the voice at the table. For example, accommodations. My son is a fall risk, and I made it very clear to the team. I shared medical reports where my son fell, and you can visually see he has a scar on his forehead where he had stitches. He's a fall risk. But how would they know that if I wasn't there to advocate about his safety? It's very important. And I'm glad I said that, because I also think that parents don't understand or know that you should have a safety plan also in your IEP. Like Morgan, that harness
plan. I had a seizure plan for her.
Yes. Seizures are a big deal.
Yeah. Someone else helped me. The group we were in, Lisa, of course, we worked together. What was it? The partnerships.
Yes.
One of the ladies in there, she helped me to understand that it was very important for me to have a seizure plan for Morgan. And she worked with her state's representatives, and I think they signed something where all parents should have a seizure plan on file for their special needs and whoever has seizures. And I think her name was Lauren. It was Lauren. Yeah, Lauren helped me to get that in place.
It's so important. And so again, it's not just about the academics. We have to look at the total child and their total experience. And so it's just very important. And I know that we're getting down to the end. So the types of accommodations we've talked about, extended time on tests, use of assistive technology. I gave you the example of my son's computer. It's a larger computer because of his vision issues, and classroom restructuring to support diverse learning needs. That's very important. My son, I had to bring it to their attention. They had my son sitting off to the right of the board. My son needs to be in front of the board so he could have a direct line of sight because of his vision condition. So seating, preferential seating, all of these accommodations are very important. The sources of authority, the accommodations are protected, again, under IDEA, ADA, and Section 504, ensuring legal rights of students for students with disabilities. Parents can request, review, and advocate for individualized accommodations, collaborating with educators for equitable access. This is very important. And also a few more responsibilities for parents under Section 504. Provide information about your child's medical, psychological, and educational needs. Work with the school to monitor the accommodations and report concerns. That goes back to that observation. And participate in periodic reviews of 504 plans. It's so important. Okay, and so I'm on 13, Paula, navigating dispute resolution safeguards. And this is very important. I want to touch down onto parent safeguards. This is really important. Every parent and every year, your IEP team should make sure that you receive a copy of the parental safeguards. And in those safeguards, it's kind of a lot, but you really need to take a look at it. Parents have rights to written notice, mediation, due process hearings, and appeals in federal court. So, understanding, starting with mediation, and that's what I told you, Paula. That's why that 92% is not necessarily 92%. You can enter into a mediation. It's a collaborative option to resolve disagreements over services and placement. Nationally, outcomes are mutually satisfactory in 70% of the cases. Now, understanding if you file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education and you agree to mediation, you also have to agree to what amounts to, and also with the state as well, an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement or confidentiality agreement. Make sure that that's something that you're fully understanding of before you enter into that agreement, and then if you sign it, because that is a very important step in the process. For years, I refused to do mediation because as a global special education advocate, I did not ever want to be constrained on what I can say and share with other parents. But I did recently have that experience. And it's something that I'll probably never do again, but I can at least say that I did try it. But just make sure you understand what you're signing before you agree to mediation. Due process hearings, these are really serious. A formal procedure when issues remain unresolved and produces binding decisions about eligibility, services, and placements. This is like a mini trial, guys. So definitely, if you can afford an attorney, I would really suggest that you have an attorney. But you can go it alone. It just takes a little research to really get yourself steady on your feet. But these are legally binding decisions. And we can talk about that later, because the administrative law judges, sometimes they come from different areas of the law. And so, if you understand what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know. But there's some states that are taking some serious proactive positions, because seems like there's a little bit of inequity in some of those decisions. I'll leave it at that. We'll come back and revisit that later. And like I said, we're going to talk about filing a complaint. You can submit your concerns to the appropriate agency, which is your state education agency, when procedural or service requirements may not be met. And it supports corrective action. As a remedy, I'll just offer to the audience, back in the summertime, I received a 22-page letter of findings, which was favorable to my son. And I was able to leverage that into a remedy. And that remedy is how we were able to agree upon non-public placement. So I want you to understand that these are very important procedural pathways for you to take when you when the requirements and procedural violations occur. So know your safeguards. When they give you that book, just try to take a little bit of time and read it. If not, so many people are running documents through ChatGPT, make it summarized, but you need to understand the safeguards. It's awareness of these options that helps parents protect children's rights effectively and choose the least disruptive path to resolution. All righty, we're winding down here. The rest of our presentation is about children's rights and inclusion. This presentation will be made available on Advocacy's website. Since we are running out of time, I'm very happy though that we were able to hit those parent responsibilities. Just understanding that under IDEA, that parents, you want to provide information about your child's strengths, needs, and their history, and participate actively in IEP meetings. Never, ever, ever go alone, and participate in those progress reviews. Collaborate with educators to monitor and adjust services. It's so important that you find out what the rule is on the observations. And again, remember we talked about those scheduling conflicts and barriers. Early on in the school year, let the teacher know, hey, I'd like to come once a month. And so that way you're letting that teacher know what your intentions are, and then you all can start working on a schedule so that you can come in and participate meaningfully as a monitor. And I will say, Paula, when I request my observations, I use specific language. As we know, language is very important. I say that I would like to come and observe my child in his class, as a member of the IEP team. So what I'm doing there is I'm putting them on notice that I'm coming there to do my observation, but that is in keeping with my role and responsibility as his advocate and as a member of the IEP team. I'm not coming as parent Lisa Wilson. I'm coming to IEP meeting. And that language is very, very important, Paula. Very important. So as we say, language matters. And while it may seem a little overly formal, again, just understanding that everything you do, it really needs to be documented, and it needs to be clear and concise so that there are no misunderstandings along the way. And so when I do that, I have my book and I have my ink pen, and I'm taking notes, I'm writing down what my personal observations are. I'm not spying on anybody, but I'm writing down my observations. And if my observations are that his needs aren't being met and his accommodations are not being implemented with fidelity, that's what my notes are going to say.
Mm-hmm. That's important. I like that part. I like what you just said. I never even thought about it like that.
Yeah, because sometimes if they think you're just coming in as she just wants to come visit her son's class, it kind of diminishes the purpose of that observation. Mm-hmm. So I want things to be unambiguous. I want it to be very clear as why I'm here, because how, as a parent, can you participate meaningfully if you're not there to actually see it? And so for me, I will say this in closing. For me, the sad thing for me is that my son has really fallen, in a very deep deficit educationally. And Paula, I wish that I had been a little bit more active in my observations. And then I also wish that someone in the IEP team would have said, we really need to look at Blake's placement to really understand as a team if we're making the best decision for him to remain in general education.
Okay. Again, if you don't, and I think for me, I think a lot of it comes from, with me, I wish when I go back, I wish I would have known more. I think I would have done more. And I think that's the hardest part about this whole process is years later, when you get the information, it kind of highlights all of the things that you did not know and what you did not know. Because some people say what you don't know won't hurt you. That's not true. And I think, when you find out all the things that you should have known years ago and you didn't know, it kind of deprives the child of getting the education that they truly need.
So I feel like the decision to put Blake in non-public placement probably could have been made 2 years ago. 2 years ago. And he's in a wonderful and amazing school. And they just have a different approach to learning. Doesn't make them better than public school, but they just have a different and a unique approach to learning that he needs, that he loves his school. And I tell you, it brought me to tears when he told me, Mommy, I love my school. Thank you for taking me to such a good school. So I feel like I got it right. I just, on a personal level, I feel like I'm belated in that. I was belated in that decision. But at the same time, it's a team.
It's a team.
And of course, I was very caught up in being his advocate, but somebody had to see my baby drowning. Somebody had to see it, you know.
Mm.
The psychologist did testing, and I mean, I was just so blown away by her testing, the comments she made. Oh, he struggled turning the pages.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, well, why didn't you turn it for him? She wrote it in several areas of her report. Okay, you see that you're struggling, so I see you document it once, but you just kept documenting it. So
and not doing anything.
Right. And my whole thing is that if I hadn't said this is enough, we gotta change his placement, he would still be in general education, drowning. They go from single digit multiplication to double digit multiplication to triple digit multiplication in a span of maybe 6 weeks. He hasn't mastered his single digit multiplication.
Wow.
No one saw him drowning.
But look at what you stepped in and did. So as a parent, your responsibility, you took that responsibility seriously, and look at what it got Blake. And I will say for Morgan, she went when she was 10. She was placed in non-public when she was 10. I'm with you. I wish she could have gotten there earlier, but the fact that she got there showed that I took my responsibility to her seriously.
Yes.
So I think as parents, we can do the best that we can. And I think whether I did it for my neurotypical son or I did it for my disabled daughter, ultimately I'm doing the best that I could. I did the best that I could with what I had. But I think for me with the team, having a team that was more that had more information, that had more skills, I think to me, I relied on them to help me through that process. But unfortunately, just be for real, that's not what you get. And I think I will say that there's a lot of people that want to do it, but it's almost like they're sworn to silence. I don't know if people know about the police when they say you bleed blue, and if you turn against them, it's almost like you have the whole police department against you. It's almost like that's kind of the mindset that's with the schools. And I just came from the CEC conference, the Council for Exceptional Children, and it was so many teachers and therapists that came past, and it was like, yeah, it was from all states, and they were saying that they knew that the kids weren't getting what they needed, or the parents didn't know, and they were like, we stepped up, we told them. And you know what I said? I said, well, if all of these people are stepping up and telling, then why do we have such a deficiency when it comes to parents? Why the parents are not being proper advocates? Because they don't have all the information. So somebody is saying they're doing it and they're really not.
Yeah.
So that's very important to me. And I just think, again, I don't know what the education would say, what they believe, and it's like it's a code of silence. You don't go against your fellow educators, but I think that's what the problem is. And because you see the needs of these kids and you don't want to go against your fellow educators, you're sworn to silence, and a lot of our kids are suffering.
Yeah. They're the collateral damage. And Paula, that is so powerful and profound what you are raising here, the code of silence. I was State Senator Alonzo Washington held a community forum, and I was just blown away. First of all, I know I've been retaliated against. I understand they're upset with me because I filed complaints and I've been successful, but I was blown away. Now, I knew 3 or 4 of the other moms there, but I was just blown away at the other parents that just showed up. And we all had to stand in line to give our public comment. They had a microphone and you had like 2 minutes to give your comment. every single parent stated that they feared retaliation.
Mm-hmm. That's real.
Then there was another parent there that read a letter from a teacher anonymously because the teacher said she feared retaliation, but she wanted to give voice to some of this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my whole thing, is that parent retaliation and even teacher retaliation, it's almost like an open secret in special
Mm-hmm.
education.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what you're saying. People are in fear of losing their jobs,
Yeah.
their fear of being shunned in the workplace, their
Mm-hmm.
fear of their supervisors antagonizing them.
Mm-hmm.
This is really a serious issue. And then parents are afraid. One parent said, I don't want to say anything because people from my son's school are here. So I'm nervous and I don't know really what to say. I can't deliver my comments. Like, I was blown away, Paula.
Yeah, this is real. It's real. And I think ultimately our kids are suffering. And that's what I think is, and I will say that there are some committed teachers, but I do also say that the fish stinks from the head on back. I think the money, the funding, although our kids need certain things, the funding is not there. So when you look at the school and you come down to the school, each school has a different budget. I think that ultimately, too, a lot of the things that our kids need, it's not being factored into the budget. So I think that's just real. I mean, it's just not being factored into the budgets. And I think if they get a certain amount of money from the state and a lot of it has to go towards the special needs, then there are other areas that thrive. So I guess they got to do a juggling act to see, okay, who's going to miss out on funding. And it all comes down to that mighty dollar. And that's just a reality.
Well, and not only that, in Prince George's County, they have now what you call the OIC, the Office of Integrity and Compliance. And I'm still not real clear on what their full mission is, but it looks like they're more interested in the contract money and, the financial fraud. But you can have an office like that, but if you don't have an incentive for people to participate, hey, offer some rewards.
Yeah.
You know that a particular educator is violating the rights of children in a school building. You should be able to go and say, I want to make this disclosure, but I'm afraid, put something in place where those people can be transferred out of there, where they can be protected, or either offer financial incentives for employees to weed out these bad actors.
I agree.
I
agree.
I mean,
there are some good teachers out there, and I will say that it's just, and I want everybody to know that advocacy is stuff like Lisa said. We're not promoting you to file a complaint. We're not putting down teachers. There's a lot of, we've had teachers on here, we've had therapists on here. There's a lot of good ones out there. It's just there are some, just like in any other job, there are some that's not committed to the job. The way that they were told, like they're telling us that they're committed. There's some that's just not committed. And as a result, our kids are not getting what they need. And it's not fair. It's not, because they have more against them in the world. We have, without special needs individuals, they have more. The odds are stacked against them from the beginning. And so they have to fight a lot harder. They have to study harder. They have to stay up later. They have to, they have to do much, much more to get to the finish line versus our neurotypical. It's just not fair. So we just want what's right for them. I don't want no special treatment for Morgan. I don't want any special treatment, but I do want what she deserves, free education as well as anyone else.
Equal access.
Yeah. I think this was definitely an important podcast. I love, Lisa, that your slides. I love that what you put together. I think it's so important that we keep pushing parents, keep encouraging parents, keep uplifting parents, keep empowering parents. And that's what advocacy is about. Although we are bringing different issues to the table and we want parents to come and tell us their story, don't forget that we're here to empower you. We're here to encourage you. We're here to uplift you. We want to tell you our stories, not because we feel like they're going to be in a top-notch magazine. No, we're telling
Right.
you our stories because we know that these real life stories, it empowers you and it makes
Mhm.
you know you're not alone. So when you're feeling like maybe, I'm sensing something, but I just don't think that I'm the one to say anything. No, you are the one to say something. You are the one. And what we've paved the way in some ways. I think we've paved the way because what our downfalls have been, it's going to help you with your children. So don't think that we don't feel bad about some of the things that our kids have had to go through, and we got them out of public school a lot later. We wish we could have did it a lot earlier. Don't don't think that we're telling you these stories because we want to. We're telling you these stories to help you.
Mhm.
So I just want that to be said. Those are my closing remarks. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Same for me. I speak from a place of personal pain.
Hmm.
I'm not into social media. I don't have any social media accounts. No one could have made me believe 2 years ago that I would be coming on here once a month to share with the world, the heaviest burden that I carry in my life. And I don't mean that negatively because I love my child, but being a full time caretaker is definitely quite a task, especially when I am a single mom and I have a full time job. So
Hmm.
it's a lot. So I come here from a place of personal pain, but I come because I really want other parents to be empowered to know that you have legal rights to advocate for your child, and nothing and no one should ever interfere or obstruct those rights. And so that's why I'm here. I am a serious advocate, and I want everyone to have a voice at the table. You take your rightful place, you speak up. If you're nervous, write it down, but you have to participate and you have to advocate for your child because, in the end, at 18, you're going to be the only person there to look your baby in the eyes. And I'm going to be able to tell mine, Mommy fought for you. I did everything I could.
Hmm.
So whether he ends up in a community college or he ends up in a traditional workforce, he's going to know that his mother did everything she could to help get him prepared for that next phase of his life.
Wow, I love it.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you guys for joining us. And again, submit your questions, your concerns, anything that you would like for us to focus on. Let us know. We're open to that. So definitely let us know because, again, we're here to help. That's it.
All righty.
All right.
Until next time we meet again.
All right. Everybody have a good one.
Take care, Paula. Good night.
Good night.